Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Dr. Rhonda M. Lawson, and I am coming to you on a Sunday night, which I don't normally do, but I think that this was a time where I needed to make an exception. There is so much going on in the literary world right now, and the Super Bowl wasn't the only big news that happened last week. So this week, we are going to be talking with um, Omar Tyree. I know y'all are like, well, Omar Tyree, didn't you hear what he said last week? I did hear what he said. And as many of you know, he's been on the show quite a few times. And I was also surprised by the conversation. So I called him. I said, you need to talk to your people because people were upset and people are talking about canceling him. And so I felt that this was a time where he really needed to talk to his fan base. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring him on. And we're going to have a real conversation about some of the things that were said. And so as I'm bringing him on, I'm just going to show you a quick snippet so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So give me 1 second and I will show you what I'm talking about.
On tour is interesting. Now I wrote those books in the 90s and in the early 2000s. So that's 20 years ago. But
Yeah.
watch how things it just map out so perfectly. In Fly Girl, she's a teenager. She don't have a problem with dominating hard rock boys. When you a teenager and you in the hood, you prefer those type of boys. You ain't gonna date no punk. You gonna date the hardest, slickest, coolest dude that give you them feelings that, oh my God, gets you all wet and spicy and uncomfortable. And he's the one that gets you, right? And that's what when y'all read Fly Girl, they all love it. He's the man. Everybody know that. He got all the dudes admire him, all the girls with. He's a fighter, he's a football player, he's a hustler. He got all. That's how we were. The top, a dominant male, right? In the second book, she goes to college for the love of money. She comes out of college. Now, when you get to that level, now women start thinking about their own money, their own status, their own life. Now, that same hard rock knucklehead that you was so in love with when you was 17, now when you 22, you looking at him like, look, I ain't doing that same hood stuff. You need to grow up. I gotta get my own money. I'm not listening. So now she's more skeptical. Ain't jumping in this boat like she would as a 17. She got her own money. So now she's like, look, I got my own money. I ain't go. So now woman is more critical of that male. May not go in there with that male. Now let's go 10 years after that when she hit 30 something. If she ain't already married and she already been a boss in her 20s, now she like, I ain't got tolerance for none of these M words out here, talking this, talking. Now she's a single boss lady with boss lady attitude, can't accept no man. And you see how my personality is. I'm not going to be carrying your bags and holding doors for you like I'm some butler. I'm still a man. So if you can't respect the dominant man now because you got your own money and you can do bad by yourself or good by yourself, you're going to end up with children and no husband and this is when you look at it, I'm like, wow. Because when I wrote it, I wasn't thinking about looking at how the future would map out. Now I'm hearing so many sisters talking about, I ain't got no time for the man. I can make it. And so now I'm like, okay, well, what kind of man you going to get with it? Because if you ain't no man going to be following behind. And then watch this. Some women have been raised with dominant men. They don't like passive men. So now even if a man follows you around, most likely you going to disrespect him and push him away because you ain't used to that. So now.
Okay, so that could go on and on, but you got the gist, and you see why a number of people are a little upset. So I invited Omar to come on the show tonight. I wanted to do this special episode so we can talk about it. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring Omar on. Hey, Omar.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. So you
Yeah.
smiling, so you saw the clip.
Yeah, again, I want to come right out. I was pumped up with the Eagles Super Bowl, and that was all masculine stadium energy. And so the content you were saying, if you deliver it calmly and more professionally, it doesn't come off that way. But in the three books that we're talking about here, by the time you get to the Boss Lady book, if you haven't established some type of rapport with a man where he knows that you're a boss and he knows how to deal with you, a lot of times when you start talking about being a boss and he doesn't know you yet, then men going to have preconceived notions about what that means for him inside the relationship. But I was so pumped up with the Eagles' victory that night, man. It's just like, wow. And then you have to take the podcast space more seriously. You know, it's not off the huff. She has a whole lot of supporters and people that watch the show. And so I was just way over the top with that masculine energy coming straight from the stadium. And that was the second night or the first night after the football win for the Eagles. And so I apologize for my tone and then bullying certain conversations in there, because those are things that, you know, I've been thinking about for black men. Older black men have had those conversations for a minute now. And I actually have a piece called The Conversation Between Man and Woman that I put together last year. So it's been on my mind for a while, but it came out in the wrong context. That wasn't what the interview was about. I shouldn't have went there, but I was all pumped up off that Eagles victory. And so now I got to go ahead and, you know, come back and explain myself in a more professional way.
Yeah. Now I will ask you, because I understand that, you know, you were pumped up, but what did you mean? Or let me rephrase. Did you mean it when you started talking about women who call themselves boss women, so to speak, not having a man? Because I will tell you, as a Black woman, I'm not only am I a Black woman, I'm a Black woman who works in the professional space. I make pretty good money doing what I do. But there are so many men out there, and I'm not going to say all. I said there are many men out there who will tell me because that I'm so busy chasing careers and chasing degrees that I don't have a man. And there are many women who are in that position to where they're being criticized for not having a man. Even though Neo made that song that everybody loves about loving a woman who has her own, we also get criticized when we do have our own, because they say we're so busy chasing that we don't know how to humble ourselves to have a man and get a man. And that's the reason we're single. And I believe that that's how your comments came across that night.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a tricky road, because Black women, when I went to Howard University, first off, let me talk about Pittsburgh. When I was at the University of Pittsburgh, white America had this saying that white women were there to find husbands. Okay. When I transferred to Howard University, no one was saying that about Black women. They were there to get educations, to get jobs. And what happens is when you do that and you're moving forward and to move your career forward, sometimes you don't have time for the man the way he wants you to have time for him. And so a lot of times guys like, she don't have time because you're focused on what you're doing. Now, a lot of times guys can do that and be focused on what they're doing, and a woman will wait for them because you get used to that. Now, we have a lot of societies where women may not work. So they're used to the guy doing his work. So that's normal for men. But when women do it, guys are now like, okay, I only get 2 hours a day with her. Is that enough for me as a man? Now, a lot of times women can do that and say, well, he's coming home and she'll do 2 hours. But for guys, it becomes an issue, because now it's like, okay, your woman is not available to you, but you still have to make your money as a Black woman. You still can't count on a man, because if you're not locked in step with that man and he's not supporting you and y'all don't have a relationship like that, you can't count on him. You have to do your own thing. And so then by the time you get to your 30s, now it starts getting a little tighter, because a lot of dudes who get married early, you know, they stay married. I got married early. And so now once you get to the 30s, it gets harder and harder, because now you're asking the question, well, why aren't you married yet? So everybody that get married older, they have a higher clientele about what they want in a mate. And when you do that, your tolerance is a lot lower than what it was in your teenage years and even in your 20s. So the tolerance of men and women gets lower and lower the older you get, because we all have had hurt relationships. We all have no time for play. And we tell individuals that. And so it becomes harder and harder, not only for women, but also for men, the older you get. Now, I'm not saying that you still can't find love in marriage at older ages, but it does get hard, particularly for Black people, because we may not have the same number of individuals who are going to be available that may be worthy of your status. So what happens is, my mother, for instance, she married a man that made less money than her, but it was not a problem in the 1970s, okay, because you didn't have as many women making the amount of money that my mother made. But as more women begin to make more money, guys begin to look at it and say, wow, now I don't have the time. She's chasing a career, and then she talks about it all the time. And so now he's thinking, where do I fit in this? And some men may not say anything about it and not like it, but I just wanted to bring it up in that context, because now the 3 books are coming back out. And in the book, Tracy Ellison pushes very hard. She's independent. She has her own brand, and she's trying to decide, do I want to compromise that with my whole love situation, if I have one? And so it becomes a decision. Do I want to give away my freedom and what I'm doing for a man, or can I find a man who will allow me to go as hard as I'm already going and still love me with the time that I have to give him? And so it becomes a time issue for real. But women are used to doing that with men working all the time. But can men do that with women working all the time? And so, yeah, it becomes different.
Yeah, it does come different. I will tell you, as just like Storm, who was the young lady who did the interview with you last week, she was in the Marines. I did 23 years in the Army, and there were times where I had to sacrifice a relationship because of my career. But I'm not saying that was the reality I needed to accept.
Right.
For me, I had to make sure that I met people who could deal with the fact that I was a career person. Right. Even now, I'm no longer in the Army, but I'm still a career person. And so I feel that a woman should have to give up her career just for the sake of having a relationship. But she needs to, when she enters a relationship, it needs to be with somebody who understands these are her goals. But unfortunately, I'm not sure that came across last week.
No, not at all. Because again, I'm pumped up with the wrong energy. I wasn't in a professional mind state. And so I admit that. I got the Eagles hat on. I'm all pumped up. So I'm talking more like locker room stuff. I'm talking barbershop stuff. And yeah, that was the last time I can do that, understanding that the podcast space is not the old school radio, it's not the old school television station, it's not the old school journalism newspaper article. It's a new thing that we're doing here. And so now I got to look at it and say, hey, man, every podcast, you got to take it seriously like a professional. You can't just go on there and go off the huff. And that was my last lesson on that, going on there off the huff, all pumped up off the game, and just made a crucial mistake. And now I have to come back and explain myself with more detail. But that's what it was. I was all pumped up and loud and everything.
Well, I will also say it's not just about the podcast space.
Right.
It's also it was Black women who read Fly Girl, For the Love of Money, and Boss Lady. It was Black women who elevated those books to make them as iconic as they were. And there were Black women who felt hurt because not just the barbershop talk, but throughout the interview, it just seemed like you were, bash seems like a strong word, but it just feels like you were kind of bashing the very people who put those books at the status that they were. You're an amazing writer. And yes, it was your talent that wrote the books that resonated with the people who read the books. Right. But it was people who read the books that put them at the status that they were. And many women felt that you totally disrespected them. You totally bypassed them, and you gave credit to men who are in prison, or you gave credit to Asian women and white women. And so they like, we're the ones who made you famous. Why are you why are you disparaging us?
Right. Well, if you think about having an argument with your brother, with your uncle, with your father, with your cousin, with a guy you went to school with guys from college. Now, if you know him, then you can go out and say, hey, man, I'm hurt and I'm talking about. And so you get fired up talking about something between y'all that you're hurt about. Right now, I'm in a position of hurt because I've been in a sour relationship for a number of years now, and I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm trying to figure out the conversations that are being had. And a lot of those conversations, they hit the fire with the whole boss lady thing, because I've been around situations where you don't have enough time for the man and you vulnerable and you're hurt. And so when in that hurt, you say, okay, I've been hearing all these conversations about the boss woman and it's hurting men, but they don't talk about it. And so I become that voice to talk about it. It was the wrong venue. It was the wrong time, but it came out because it's sitting in my mind, it's sitting in my heart. And I hear more and more interviews and more women saying what they're not going to do for a man, what they want, what they're worthy of. And now I'm looking at, well, wow, the men don't get a chance to talk about it. And a lot of times they don't, because they're like, look, it's not going to change anything. I just want to get along and get what I can get. And so now it's like you're not getting honesty from it. And so sometimes it can make you feel uncomfortable. And that's what it did. It made us feel uncomfortable. But you do the research on it and you find out that we are the people who are divorcing the most and have the most separation. And so when you bring up the other cultures, it's not to bash us, but to let us know that we are in this dire situation. Now, when you talk about the Asians, they have the best marriages in the world. They have the highest percentages. They stay married the longest. Now, I'm not going after Asian women, but I'm saying that the black women say, how can we get ourselves in a better position where we can make our marriages last longer? Now, of course, we've had more challenges in this country. This country has done us real wrong, black men and black women. So we're both hurt trying to figure out how we can stay together. And I'm old school, so I want us to stay together. So I'm putting things out there that we have to think about in a conversation with honesty so we can finally mesh out some of the disagreements that we have. Because I'm on there as a man, but we have a whole lot of men that would never go on a show and never say what they're feeling right now. And so it's a whole lot of men that's like, yeah, Omar's saying it. He didn't say it right, but that's what we're feeling right now. And we need to get in those conversations, and they're tough conversations. And so here we are in a space where everybody can comment on a tough conversation, but we need to keep talking about it to get it right. And so, yeah, I said some things that, that were snowballing and things, but it's all predicated on me knowing what the percentages are, knowing what the studies are, knowing what the cultural references are, where some people may have a perspective where they don't look at that. With me being a journalist, I'm always looking at the numbers. I'm always thinking about what's being said. And so sometimes when you bring that up and the person has another perspective, then I'm looking at, okay, have you read what I read? Have you heard what I heard? And that's why we have to have more of these conversations so we can know what's being said from each group, so we can come to a conclusion of what the right things are for all of us, because we can't have separate groups all over the place.
I'll say this, Amar. Yes, numbers may indicate that Asians may stay married longer, but there's more to it. And being a journalist, just as I'm a journalist, that was my job in the military, and that's my job now, is journalism. Numbers only tell a part of the story.
Right.
And as you know, numbers can be interpreted any kind of way you want. That's what makes statistics so interesting. Is that you can look at numbers, but until you dig deeper, you find out the numbers only tell a piece of the story. Right. So if you look at purely the numbers and say, well, Asian women are staying married longer, and Black women need to learn what is making them stay married so long, and why do they have the best marriages? There's just so much more to it than that. Right. And what I can't do is I can't speak for every culture. I know in my culture, right, a Black woman, I see these conversations between men and women happening all the time. I see men who do think pieces on women. They base their think pieces on stereotypes instead of actually doing doing the study to see what's really going on. Mm-hmm. So their think pieces are on Black women having five kids, or black
Right.
women using men for money, and that is not always the case. So then when we speak in generalities and make it seem like that is the rule instead of the exception, because unfortunately the exception gets talked about more than the general. That's
Right.
what it makes it seem like that's our reality for everybody, and that's not always the case.
Well, that's why that was the wrong context to have that in, where you're supposed to be answering certain questions and you go off the huff and start bringing up stuff that no one else was prepared for. But that's where, when you have that hurt in your heart and that hurt in your mind, and you know that there's the issues that you have to deal with, sometimes as an artist, we bring up those issues that other people don't want to deal with. And that becomes the bravery of an artist. I've been doing that my whole career. I got a book called Single Mom that I came out with in 1998. And I had a sister from New York who was helping me to put the book together as far as, references of her real life. And she was a single mom. And it got to a point where she said, Omar, this book is so raw, so real, it's opening up old wounds. I can't help you to finish this because it's starting to hurt me. Because that's how realistic the book was. And it was based in Chicago, ironically. And so I've always written books like that. I wrote a book called Just Say No about the music industry. And I was going into the sinisterness of the music industry. And now when this stuff came out about musicians and the horrors of the music, I said, I wrote that a long time ago. And so I was always digging into, issues that some people get kind of unnerved about. Leslie is a book I wrote about New Orleans poverty. And then I wrote about the light skin and black skin or dark skin issues. And women at that time were upset with me. Why are you still writing about, light and black issues and poverty? And we still had Hurricane Katrina that happened. Black people didn't have any money. They're walking across the bridge. We still have Creoles and dark-skinned blacks in New Orleans. And now young people, if you listen, they're using the term colorism now. And so I've always been ahead of a hotbed issue. And so, yeah, this time I went off the huff and got in trouble. But that's what I've always been able to do, take hotbed issues and turn them into, conversations and books where we can look at them. Now, I don't have this book out yet. I don't have the book. So I ran my mouth before I could have a book where I could have more detailed, analyzed, and calm information where it all makes sense. So now with me coming off the huff like that in an interview, now I got to come back and say, okay, Omar, you make sense. You got to make sense again and come back in and be more professional. And so, yeah, that was, again, my last hurrah and not understanding what I'm dealing with social media. It is a new animal that you have to take seriously. And so I have to be prepared from here on out to make sure I say the things that are on point and I don't come off the cuff with just raw emotions.
Well, I'll say this. I want you to say what you mean and mean what you say. Yeah, I do say take your audience into consideration. And like I said, the people who put those books at the status that they are Black women. So I don't want you to pander to us, but at the same time, understand us, because I'm telling you, you're not a Black woman, but it is tough being a Black woman. First we're told that we're not aggressive enough. We're lazy. Then we're told we're too aggressive. Then we're told that we need to have our own, but then we're told you acting like you don't need a man. It's always something. It's like we're being pulled either way.
Yeah.
And so then a person that we have elevated doesn't seem to give us that love either. It's tough.
Yeah, it is.
And it's one more person that is telling us that we're not good enough. I mean, even the relationships book, the relationship books out there are basically written telling women, Black women, what we're doing wrong and why we're broken and why we don't have a man. And there are very few that celebrate us. And then when men do celebrate us, they're called simps, they're called soft, they're called this and that and the other. And so it makes it very tough. And I think that's part of the reason why relationships are not working as much as they can, is because of that battle between the sexes. So somebody who's in a position such as yourself who can advocate for us, that's actually what we need. But like I said, I don't want you to say just to make us feel good. We've seen that happen with certain YouTubers, and I'll just leave it at that, who were
Right.
saying everything to supposedly make us feel good, and then it comes to find out that that wasn't what he wasn't believing that at all. He was actually pandering to us because that was his moneymaker. We don't want you to be that way, Omar. We just
Right.
really want to know how you really feel.
Well, the reality is, when I first came into the writing game, it's ironically, we had a lot of sisters writing about men that did them wrong. I called them the Black Man Done Me Wrong books. And this was in the early 90s with Disappearing Acts with Terry McMillan. I love Terry McMillan. I've been around Terry, so I understand what she was going through. But then I had to put out a book, A Do Right Man, to remind us that we do have good men in the community. So
Yeah.
it's ironic that now I'm on the other side of it. But yeah, I was just a little hurt because I want that conversation to be had with a lot of guys who are doing the right thing now. And a lot of times they don't get the appreciation that they want, and they look that they're not worthy, and then they get upset with women, and women get upset with them. So we got a lot of battles going on. But the irony is that when I first started writing, I came in here to balance out the men's story, because we didn't have the men's story in the early 1990s. And so now the women have, in a sense, they've had so many stories and they've had so much dominance in the book trade that we didn't have a masculine voice. And what you brought up, I know masculine friends that write male characters that don't have the edge to them, that don't have the characteristics that real men would have because they want the women to enjoy the book. And so they have characters that are not authentic. And I read a lot of those books and I'm like, what kind of man is this? And so what they do is create men where it doesn't disturb the woman. And so you brought that up, where they want to make their money, but they're not bringing up stuff that we really need to deal with. I have not been that writer. I have always brought up stuff that we really need to deal with. I wrote a book, Sweet St. Louis, which I called the Black on Black Love book. And they had a lot of great conversations and a lot of great decisions in that book because I wanted people to know it's tough decisions that you have to go through. And one of the toughest decisions I had in Sweet St. Louis, we had a girlfriend of the girl, the main girl, and a guy friend of the main guy that were both putting salt in the game. Well, you can't trust him because he ain't doing it. And the guy was like, you can't trust her because she ain't doing that. And at the end of the book, I had the man and the woman have to push out from all the noise outside of them and say, look, we love each other. We trust each other. This is where we need to be. That's in my book, Sweet St. Louis. But that's a lot of drama involved in that thing of hearsay of what people are saying outside that group that could mess it up. And so I have a lot of books where I did the hard stories. And that's what I always do. And so this, again, is a hard conversation, but now it has to funnel into a story, more conversation. And then I have to clean myself up with what I say and how I say it. But yeah, the content and the subject is something that we still need to have the conversations about because the numbers are there and the broken families are there. And I wanted to maintain more families that have unions for 30, 40 years. So I'm just trying to get sisters back on point where it's like, some of the words that we use, not just women, but men. And I just happen to be talking to women on that podcast and not men. But with men, I would say the same thing to them. When that young woman does what you need her to do and she loves you, you got to show her everything back. You cannot play with that because that's what we're talking about. The woman's trust in a man and a man's trust in a woman. Right now, we're not trusting each other because we both have platforms that have expectations that are not being met on both sides, and we're not talking about that in a clear conversation. So that's what sometimes you're a rebel rouser, and I did it in the wrong platform, but the conversations are conversations that need to be had.
Well, it would be irresponsible of me if I didn't ask you about this because actually we just got a comment. I was going to ask you about it, and then the comment popped up. But you made a statement a little while ago where you said that certain men would have characteristics that real men have. I'm wondering what you meant by real men. Are you talking people versus characters, or are you talking about so-called soft people and soft men and real men? What did you mean when you said real men?
Well, if a man feels A, but he says B because he doesn't want to piss off his woman, then I was raised by men that say you say what you say and you mean what you say. Now we have a lot of men that they jump around depending on what they're going to get the most love from. So they're not going to tell you what they really feel. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. Now, I've been hearing that since I was a boy. When guys would tell you how to hook up with women, guys are still doing that. And so when I'm reading a lot of the books, I'm reading the guy and I'm saying, wow, this dude is not acting in cohesion of what a man would do, where you have to say some of the tough things to women and she has to pretty much deal with it. Now, there's a book from, again, Terry McMillan, that Disappearing Acts book. She had a character in there named Franklin Swift, and he talked about his constitution over and over and over again. I love that male character because he was real. And that book did phenomenal numbers. And that was the book that pushed Terry way over the top. Disappearing Acts. That was one of the best male characters that I had read from a lot of books that were coming out. But a lot of the books that I was reading, the characters from the men, it felt like they were there to satisfy the woman in a woman's romance book. And trust me, I'm around men all the time. I'm a football player. So I was reading that and saying, would a real man do this? Would a real man say that? And so I understood that some of those writers, again, they want to make sure they make their money. So they don't want to put anything in there that's uncomfortable for a woman. And that's what I mean. I don't mean like, you know, gay men or anything of that nature. I mean men that's going to say whatever they need to say to keep that woman happy, whether he agrees with that or believes in that or not.
Well, I'm going to ask you this. I feel, and this is a good conversation that we can take right back to books. There are a lot of books where the characters are either one way or they are another way. Mm-hmm. I personally didn't like Franklin in Disappearing Acts. He started off great, but when they broke up, he wrecked the house.
Yeah. But see, I'm not looking at him as being a moralistically correct character. I'm looking at him as being a truthful character, an authentic character. And when I'm writing books, what happens with a lot of editors, they start talking about likability, make him likable. But if you're trying to apply a certain lesson, if he's not supposed to be likable, then he's not, because you're not going to learn the lesson if you make every character likable. And so sometimes you get people that push because they want you to make the money. They want people to feel good. But that's where I say you end up writing characters that pander to making a woman feel good instead of giving her the truth that she really needs to think about. And so Franklin Swift, yeah, you didn't like him at the end, but with me reading him as a male, I said, yeah, that's how some men are. How can we get him back to the table? How can we get him to do the right thing? Because if you write a character that didn't do that and it doesn't come off as authentic, and you go out thinking that these men are like that character, and I'm like, yo, man, they made that character fit the woman's desires. In real life, she probably would have to do more conversations with him to get him over that side of the fence. But you read a book where a person wanted you to be happy at the end, so he gave you that happiness, where in real life, that may not be the case. And so that's what I was reading with being an authentic writer, where I'm going to write authentic characters. And so when I bring up my book, Sweet St. Louis, oh, that was a tough book. And the guy cried at the end. When the woman had faith and trust in him, he cried at the end, because so many guys are like, man, women don't believe in me. If the girlfriend say I did something wrong, she gonna believe the girlfriend. And Sweet St. Louis, she said, that's my man. I'm gonna go bail him out with my money. I made it really dramatic. You gotta bail him out with your college money. And she did that. That's what I was doing, because she had that much faith in her man. And so when I write books, I really try to take it to that level.
I don't care how much faith my daughter would have in her boyfriend. If she's using her college money to bail this boy out of jail, especially if we know he did it, oh, I'm whipping her behind. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I know. But he didn't. In the book Sweet St. Louis, he was actually innocent, and his friend had gotten you. But the woman had. Did my man do that or not do that? So that was, and it was beautiful, because he's in there like, I didn't do it, and you know he didn't do it because you read the book. But you're thinking, is she going to believe that he didn't do it? And so when she bailed him out and he cried, dude, that's the kind of stories I want to write that really take you there. But I'm not going to make a man pander to the woman, because then you're not going to get those hard lessons. That was a hard lesson in Sweet St. Louis when she had to bail him out, but you already knew that he wasn't the culprit that did that crime. So you're looking at her and saying, is she going to do it? Is she going? And when she did it, you said, thank God. But that's what I'm trying to create in the books that I write, with Black people really coming together through real struggles in my books. I'm not going to try to make them, solve struggles and things that make you happy. I want the hard book. And because I'm coming from that old era, man, I feel like I was born in the wrong era and I should have been around in the 60s when you could do a certain way, you could say a certain, but this is a different era where you got to be,
Well,
cautious and
let
polished
me
with
ask you
what
this,
you say.
Omar. Are there
Yeah.
any books that have been written in the last couple of years that you feel have strong male characters? Because I noticed that you referred a lot to Terry McMillan's books, and I believe at one time you've mentioned Michael Baisden. Do you have any books that you've read currently, and you don't have to share names if you don't want to, but that have strong male characters?
I haven't been reading lately because that's one of the things that happened on the interview. I've been trying to put together a lot of things that I'm doing right now. So I've been helping other people write. I've been writing a lot of stuff, and I actually want to start an imprint because there's a lot of books that I want other young people to start writing. So I want to get in that position where I'm no longer writing because, yeah, you can get older and the newer perspective is new, it's different. So a lot of the things I'm talking about now, I would rather have younger people writing those stories because they're closer to the struggle. But that's what I'm talking about. If you're only going to write a story, Rhonda, that appeals to the audience that's going to sell, but you're not doing the work that really wakes them up and gets them talking about things that we need to cover, then I just look at that as a person going after the money. And so I had a book called For the Love of Money, which is the Fly Girl sequel. And I had a great statement in that book where it says those who are creating for the love of money are always getting worse. They're always copying and trading stuff. Those who create for the love of the art are always getting better, but they have to keep fighting past the noise to let everyone know that this is a book that is needed. And so right now, I'm being coached by everybody. Omar, go back and apologize and say this. Say you didn't mean it. And so what people typically do, they want to massage the audience instead of looking at, okay, this is what was said, but how many valid points can we have a discussion about in our community? Omar is sorry for his tone. He is sorry for pushing it out there. But let's talk about these issues now, because I've been in the community a long time. I do not hate Black women. I love Black women. I'm always around Black women. I talk to Black women every day. So if I have a dispute with Black women, it's because I love us and I'm trying to get us to think and move forward as a people, because we can't have Black women on one side of the room and Black men on the other side of the room and think we're going to come together in a union to do what we need to do as a community.
I get it. I get it. And that's the reason why I wanted to invite you on the show. And the only thing I've said when it comes to apologies is I felt that Storm was insulted by some of the things that you said, and I thought that maybe you could apologize to her. But I wanted you on my platform because I wanted you to talk about your comments. And like I said earlier, I want you to say what you mean and mean what you say. If you came on here and said, "I'm not sorry, I don't care," that would have been your thoughts. So I'm not gonna tell you what to say. The only thing I ask is that you give Storm an apology. But how you feel is how you feel. I just wanted you to clarify how you feel. Because
I actually text Storm immediately, with the situation, because I felt bad that I went overkill with everything. But once she was already hurt, she has a whole audience and she went to bat, you know what I mean? Fine, check this out, I'm not mad at her because I look at it and say, God works in mysterious ways. Those comments and those things were on my mind as a discussion piece. She didn't have that venue for her to do that, but God pulled it out of me because he's like, Omar, you're going to have to bring these things up because it's something that you're thinking about right now. So it came out when it wasn't supposed to, but now I'm going to end up talking about this for the next few months, and I'm going to be talking about for a while. And, these are comments that we need to talk about. So for me not doing this, then we would not have had this conversation. I got more interviews where they're going to ask me about it. So now I can keep bringing up conversations of clarity. But I did apologize to Storm. But yeah, when you're in the social media crowd, she's like, no, it's too late for that. I'm going to tell the audience, but I'm not hurtful about the thing. I went overboard. I apologize to her again. I did apologize to her. But yeah, like right now, it's like she wanted to put it out there in the atmosphere. So now I got to go ahead and respond to everybody that has something to say or a question to ask. And I have to be very comfortable and professional with answering those questions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the fact that you did apologize to her, and that seems like since you texted her right away, it wasn't something that people had to coax you to do.
Yeah, when you in that venue, when people get mad, they right afterwards, you know what I mean? Like they're not trying to. So maybe in a couple more weeks, maybe I don't know. But again, I have always been one to bring up the tough issues. So a lot of people they don't know me as a person. They know the books, they read the books, but they've never heard me in an interview. They've never seen me in a discourse. But
And no,
all the
you're
other authors, yeah, all
right.
the other authors will tell you Omar has always been the one that will bring up the tough issues. He's been that way since he was 25. He was the
Oh, well,
youngest, and he was
you and I
always
have
that
known
way.
each other a long time. I
Right,
already know how you roll, and that was one of the reasons why I thought this was a good place for you to come because we already know each other.
right, right.
Now I do want to ask a question. Sharon Jenkins said, "What do you feel like? What do you feel is the bridge that will bring us together?" Talking about Black men and women.
Well, I got a film that I came up with last year called The Conversation. And I'm no lie because I've been thinking about this for years. It just came out this way. I had a conversation yesterday with a sister from Atlanta, and I said, this movie, The Conversation, is a date movie where they're trying to figure out where they're going, but they want to lay it all on the table. Now, I saw Prince's movie, Purple Rain, back in the day, where Morris Chestnut said, it's rare when I put my cards on the table when it comes to meeting young lady, but I'm going to make you love me. And he put all his cards on the table for Apollonia. But that was the line, putting your cards on the table. What's going on now, Rhonda? Young men are hearing women speak and they are not putting their cards on the table. So a young woman is thinking he's in agreement with her when he's not. He's waiting for his opportunity to leave if anything goes sour. So he's not really committing to her. So I want a film called The Conversation where you're putting everything on the table so you know where you're going. Because now we got too many conflictions where we're not saying where we're going. We're expecting to go a certain place, but we're not saying that to our mate. So if you're not telling him that, now you go left and he thought you was going to go right. Now you go 10 yards when he thought you was going to go 3. That's going to end up being a problem. So I already have a venue where I want to talk about this outside of just having conversation. I want to put that in a movie, and the whole movie is one date at the steak shop or whatever, where they going back and forth about sexuality, economics, culture, religion, a family, everything. I got like 20 topics that I wanted them to talk about because we don't talk about enough topics when we're dating. We might do 3 topics. There's a lot more things you're going to be involved in with that man. And so I already have a vehicle set up that I had set up last year. And what happens is when you don't get a chance to express these vehicles as an artist, sometimes it can come out in awkward ways because it's in my spirit, it's in my soul to talk about that conversation between Black men and Black women. So I'm
What
already working on it. It's
what
already
you
coming.
reminds me of Hill Harper's book. He had a book a while years ago, I believe it was called The Conversation.
Yeah,
And
letters to the young brother. Then he had letters to the young sisters. Yeah,
yeah,
and he was down here in Charlotte. I hung out with him. Go ahead.
yeah, he's a good guy. I don't know him, but I used to love how he used his platform.
Yeah,
But in this book, he did have conversation between men and women. In fact, he actually inspired. I used to have conversation parties where I would invite people over in different stages of relationships.
right,
People who were dating, a married couple, a single person, and
right,
we would, and just like in his book, they would throw all the questions into a bowl, shake it up, and then we pull the questions out one by one, and we would discuss the question from those different perspectives. And
right,
it was interesting. I haven't done
right,
that in a long time. But this film that you're talking about, I think is well needed. And
right.
it reminds me of that book.
Right. Now you talking about he was popular when Barack Obama first became president.
Yes.
So we're talking 15 years ago. You see how that works? 15 years ago. And then we had the book, what's that? Talk like a woman, act like a man. What was that from Steve Harvey, the book that came out?
Act like a lady, think like a man
Yeah, that book
by
was
Steve.
gigantic. And I'm sitting there thinking, Steve Harvey has had his own transgressions with marriages, but he's talking about how to, you know what I mean? But it went off the chain, but that was when Oprah still had her book club and Tyra Banks had. So then we had venues. Now we have social media where everybody has a perspective. So you're not hearing one calm view of what's going on. You're hearing 100 perspectives. And in that arena, now I'm like, okay, we need another conversation where all these perspectives are on the table so we can all hear them together. So when I talked to the sister yesterday, who's a producer, I said, look, I don't want this to be written by me. I want to interview people to get all the perspectives. Then we put that on the table for the characters to say, so it can cover everybody's angle instead of just a couple people's angles, because I want to be a journalist on this thing and I want it to reach as many people as possible. I do not want to irritate people. I want to inspire people and I want to get them talking. But we have to put those tough conversations on that table. So if we say them too hard, okay, tone this down, but they still have to talk about this issue because it is an issue that we have to have conversations about. And I was just on the phone for 2 hours yesterday talking to my sister, and it's called The Conversation. That's simple. I always do simple titles because that's what it is. We need to have this conversation away from it. Can't keep running away. It's the far side. We can't keep doing that. And that's what's going on right now. We have men that won't talk about it because they don't want to irritate the women. Right now, think about it. Omar, you just messed up your woman audience. What are you doing? Every man's like, why would you do that? You messing up your own. So they're thinking more about money than they're thinking about the issue that I'm bringing up. And so sometimes you have to put that on the table and say, look, even if I don't make money, this issue is that important to me. And that's old school artists. That's old school. And that's why I say I was born in the wrong era. The rebel rousers that will say the tough things that need to be said. Now everybody wants to protect their money, protect their audience, and watch everything they say. I do apologize for my tone and for bullying that on there for Storm, but the issues that I brought up, they're game for us to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you can see, just, I don't know if you see all the comments that are popping up on Facebook and so forth. But it is a conversation that needs to be had. Just about everybody here said a conversation is necessary. So yeah, there might have been some people upset, but it did spark a conversation that needs to be had.
Right.
And I hope that the conversation will continue even further than this show.
You know, they're gonna keep asking me about it now, but that's why I say again, it wasn't intended. I was pumped up. The Eagles won a sustain. So I was pumped up and it came out of me. But here's the deal. You know, I have a tough skin. I'm a Philadelphian. We're tough skinned people. So sometimes the tough skinned people get the tough jobs. And so I have to accept it. I put my mouth out there. Now, Omar, you got to go in the fire and go ahead and deal with it. And so that's what I have to do. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm going to have to go right in that fire, apologize for the things that was wrong, and then get us talking about the things that we need to talk about.
Okay. One last question. I appreciate you, first of all, coming on the show and being willing to talk about this. We talked about this 2 days ago and said we need to do this, and I appreciate the fact that you were willing to talk with me about it. My question, and I think a lot of people want to know, and I see it in the comments. Right. Are we having this conversation because of your respect for women, or because it may hurt your book sales?
Well, at the end of the day, every book I write is because I love my community. I'm from an area in West Philadelphia called The Bottom, where it was very small, very black, and we were a very tight city or very tight neighborhood. That's where I grew up. I grew up with aunts and uncles because my mother was the oldest of 8. My father was the oldest of 4. So I'm a communal person. Now, my grandmother was one that would always stand up for things that needed to be right in the hood. So I'm used to it. My mother would speak up for things that needed to be right. So I'm used to it. So I'm that person that will always speak up on things that we need to speak up on. And sometimes it's not comfortable. I've always been doing that. When I was at Howard, I had a column called Food for Thought. And every Friday, I wrote something that people were pissed off about because I was willing to write about real issues that would get people stirred up. I always done that. And so that's been my personality from day one. So I'm never thinking about, the money aspect. I'm always thinking about what is the most important book, the most passionate book for me to write right now. Last year, I put out a book called Control. We are out of control as a people. A lot of temperaments are out of control. A lot of attitudes are out of control. A lot of money things are out of control. And so I wrote about that. I'm out of control because I learned that you cannot control the world. All you can do is control yourself. But a lot of things can frustrate you, which makes you respond to it. And so last year I wrote a book called Control because I could feel that I'm losing it when you're not able to control the social media, when you're not able to control who gets the movies and who doesn't, when you're not able to control who gets the interviews and who doesn't.
The only thing you can control is yourself. You can't control how people respond to you. You can't control how people react. All you can do is control what you say and what you do. And that was the reason why I asked the question. But I know we're coming up on the hour, and I try not to go past that hour. But once again, I want to thank you for talking with me on my platform.
Right.
I hope that what you meant was if conveyed to the people who were watching. There were a lot of comments. If you get a chance, go back and take a look at the comments, both on Facebook as well as on YouTube. And I want you to keep writing. I mean, we have a journalist.
It's not going to stop. It's not, and that's one of the things. Like, you have a lot of people now, and I have to say that they don't know me, but I'm an overachiever my whole life. So I've always went it up. And so God put this as let me put this roadblock in front of them, knowing how determined I am. So I'm going to keep going because we already have things in store. And now I have to be more sensitive and I have to learn more. And so God is telling me, okay, Omar, I'm going to put you in position, but you're going to have to listen more and you're going to have to adapt. And I'm going to force it on you. So this situation here, it now forces me to adapt and adjust to the new world and understand accordingly what you have to do to make sure you're on point in the new world and you're not pissing people off with stuff that you say and how you say it. And so again, this was a training ground for me because again, we didn't grow up with social media. It's a new thing for us. You know, I'm used to being on regular radio, regular television, regular print. So I have to take this seriously and watch everything you say and how you say it.
All right. That's a great way to end the show. Thank you once again for talking with me. I want to thank all of you for, first of all, the healthy conversation in the chat. I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys watching the show and supporting this special episode. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Please continue to share. Let's keep the conversation going. We expect a lot out of people who we admire, and for many of us, Omar is an OG in this writing game, and so we respect what you have to say. And I think that's why people felt the way they did. But thank you for coming on tonight. Like I said,
thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So everybody, join me tomorrow night. I will be talking with Derek Jacoby Washington and Tori Q Jones. They are going to be two of the guests on Horizons Author Lounge. And then catch me on Tuesday for Black Authors Matter TV. We're going to keep this conversation rolling. We're going to keep it flowing. I appreciate you all. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let's continue to make this show grow because this is what this show is all about. So you guys have a wonderful evening. And as we fade on to black, I just want to show you guys the promo for the 9th annual Ivory and Cream Affair, which will be happening on Saturday at 11 a.m. And then after that, we're just rolling right on out. So God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening. I hope you had a great weekend.